Today I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the most important questions you can ask. And it's what I think could probably be described as the most fundamental, essential question in ethics. And that is, what is the meaning of life? Now, when we say, what is the meaning of life, most people don't understand the question, right? They're like, meaning of life, that sounds so abstract, so unclear, It sounds like something that's like totally off in academic land somewhere, where no ordinary people ever sort of even approach understanding what the question means, let alone asking it, or heaven forbid, answering it, But actually, the question of the meaning of life is very important. It's very practical. And it has to do with you and what you are doing right in your life right now. Right? And this might be made clear by restating the question in more practical terms, right? And the more practical form of the question is, what is the summum bonum? The summum bonum is a Latin phrase. It means the end of ends, right? That which is not a means, that end or goal, which is not a means to any further end, but which is an end in itself. What is the ultimate reason why you are doing all of the things that you consider to be good, that you consider to be your goals, right? What is the ultimate goal which all of your other goals in life are serving? This is particularly important when you're going to college, like I am, because in college you're kind of separated in a way from your actual life work, You're kind of abstracted from your life work and what you do every day, so that there's some distance between what you're actually doing and why you're doing it, which is a little bit harder to perceive than when you're in, elementary school, middle school, high school, and when you're actually doing it. Because in college, you are preparing yourself to do something else in life, hopefully, if you're going to college for practical reasons, right? Like I am. I guess I was a little more of a pragmatist when I chose my career, my major, than I think maybe I should have been. I'm a computer science major, right? And the reason I'm a computer science major is because I'm really good at programming, and I think I can make a lot of money at programming, right? That's why I decided to be a computer science major instead of a philosophy major, because I believed that the reason for going to college was practical. It was so that I could get a job which could earn me enough money so that I could have a family and be able to support a family, right? So I could have the nice little house with the white picket fence and a little dog named Spotty or whatever, named Spot, right? The American dream, right? Own your own little piece of the world, right? That's the American dream. Own your own land. Own an automobile, right? Have some measure of economic control over your own life. That's kind of what, people always want to describe the American dream as being rich. Well, that's maybe part of it. Maybe that's, taking, but I think that's really taking the American dream a little further than it really was originally intended to be. It really is about, achieving financial independence, not necessarily becoming independently wealthy, but achieving some ownership, being able to actually produce something that's going to support your life, That's sort of the American dream. But in philosophy, we take the question a little further. Why should you produce this, you produce it in order to survive. Why should you survive, right? What is the purpose or goal of your survival? Because, you see, we naturally assume that survival is the highest end, right? We often make survival the summum bonum, you know? We make survival the end in itself. But as Socrates shows in the Crito, Plato wrote the Crito, that survival is not the ultimate end. There are some things in life which are more important than survival. Socrates makes standing up for his principles. I don't necessarily share his principles, by the way, but Socrates makes standing up for his principles more important than his own survival. That is something I agree with him on. I think there are certain principles which are more important than survival, right? Survival is not an end in itself. It is a means to a further end, right? If survival was not a means to a further end, but was an end in itself, then we would accept an outcome of survival under any circumstances, under any conditions, right? Survival would always be preferable to death, you know, at any price. But when Patrick Henry says, "Give me liberty or give me death," he is proposing an end to which survival is only a means. The end being liberty, right? He is saying that he is saying that survival is less important than liberty. Give me liberty or give me death. That's what he's saying. Lewis gives us an ethical, proposition in which he says that we have to put first things first and second things second, because if we put second things first, we lose both the first things and the second things, right? And he's saying we have to realize what is our ultimate end, our summum bonum, Why are we doing all these things? Why are we living our life? And only then can we make our priorities so that we put our first things first and our second things second. So that's the question. I've now raised the question. I hope I've raised it adequately. Why do I go to college, right? Why do I want to get married and have a family and do all that stuff, right? Well, the religion that I belong to, and I understand, of course, from my earlier videos, as I've explained, I only acknowledge as valid an examined faith, not an unexamined faith. So I'm trying to have an examined faith. The religion to which I belong gives a summum bonum. In fact, it gives God a summum bonum, right? God has an end of ends, right? It's in the Doctrine and Covenants. God says, "This is my work and my glory, to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man." So the summum bonum for God, the end to which God works, which is not a means to any further end, but which is the end in itself, is the immortality and eternal life of man. This is the key principle which is meant to explain everything that God does, no exceptions, right? Everything that God does is to serve this end. This is his summum bonum. And since he has an absolute perfection, both in ethics, both in morals, and in wisdom and knowledge, right? Wisdom being knowledge of ends, while knowledge being, knowledge of means. I guess that wasn't put very well. Wisdom being the ability to apprehend ends, and knowledge being the ability to apprehend means. Being totally perfect in both wisdom and knowledge, all of God's actions serve his summum bonum of immortality and eternal life with no mistakes. Okay? So what Latter-day Revelation tries to do is explain, is have God explain his behavior. right? Whereas, other religions just simply ask you to trust that God sort of somewhere back there got probably some kind of good reason for it all, and we're just supposed to trust that He kind of knows what it is, and He doesn't really share that knowledge with us, right? But in latter-day revelation, the Summum Bonum is explicitly shared with us. It's not something you find in the Bible all by itself, at least not in such clear, unequivocal terms, right? And so that is the proper Summum Bonum, and you could give a whole class just on explaining what that means. Part of it is that eternal life is more than just physical life, and it is existence, but it is more than just existence. It's a particular kind of existence. It is an eternal existence, right? An existence which sees beyond time, right? Eternal life is different from just life, And that gets into some really deep stuff. Anyway, now our end is, also, our eternal life in that sense. Oh, also, eternal life is not a selfish thing, right? To truly desire eternal life is not selfish in the sense of putting yourself above the eternal life of others, right? Because then you're not truly desiring eternal life. Okay? Desiring eternal life means putting the priorities of your life in a specific order, the order of joy, right? Joy is not just a feeling, right? It's a set of priorities. Joy, the priorities of joy can be explained through an acronym, right? An acronym. What joy stands for. Joy stands for Jesus, others, and you, right? So you could say that people who do not have these basic priorities, these being the priorities of Christian morality, people who do not have all three of these priorities in that specific order are either bad at ethics or bad at spelling. Okay? Because non-Christian altruists basically spell oi, right? Others and then yourself. That's a non-Christian altruism, right? Ayn Rand is just why, Objectivism is just yourself, A more, softy kind of objectivism would be, yourself and then others, right? When Christians foul up, right? They foul up Christian ethics, right? They lose track of what's really important. They start to put their priorities in some other order other than joy, right? Any other order other than joy is, sin basically consists in putting your priorities in some order other than joy, right? Like putting others before the Lord, right? That was the sin of, I believe her name was Mary Magdalene, but I guess I should know my New Testament better than I do. The woman who wanted the other woman to come in and help her clean stuff, instead of listening to Jesus teach in the New Testament, right? She put her priorities in a different order, right? She put her priorities in the OYJ kind of order, right? That was her sin, right? It was the wrong priorities. Selfish Christians, do, Yaj. They put it absolutely backwards, or YJO, Selfish Christians put themselves first. And then they either put religion after themselves or put others after themselves, and then religion, Or when I say religion, I mean one's devotion to God, not a physical organization, right? So I should probably say righteousness, or, one's devotion to the Lord, is the J. By the way, the J is not so much, Jesus, personally, I mean, it is that, but it is more than that. You know, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments, right? So putting J before O, you know, Jesus before others, means not serving others at the expense of breaking commandments, of doing things that are unethical, right? That's the problem with the utilitarians, you know. They put others before the commandments, before the law. When I say the commandments, I don't mean just the 10 Commandments. I mean the whole moral law, the whole moral order, right? Utilitarians put others before the whole moral order. Okay, so I think that explains the Summum Bonum in Christian ethics and the Latter-day Saint approach to ethics, or at least the RLDS approach to ethics in particular. There are all kinds of other Summum Bonums that have been suggested, right? Might talk about some of those other Summum Bonums some other time, why they don't work, or when they do work, just why they don't bring you happiness. By the way, when I say that eternal life is the Summum Bonum, I do not mean to exclude happiness as the Summum Bonum, right? Happiness, blessedness, eternal life, the true kind of happiness, right? Joy, these things are all identical, right? There's no separation between them. Okay? And so I hope that's clear. All right, well, I think that's about enough for today. Talked a lot more about it than I planned to. But yeah, so that's the philosopher's question of the Summum Bonum and the theologian's answer, you know. All right, well, there we go.